The Duke of Blackwood, Alistair Ashworth, stood before his solicitor, a grim set to his aristocratic jaw. "The papers are drawn, then?" he inquired, his voice devoid of emotion, yet carrying an undeniable weight of finality. "The annulment will proceed as planned." His solicitor, Mr. Finch, nodded gravely, the rustle of parchment echoing the death knell of a marriage barely a year old. Alistair had married Lady Eleanor Ashworth out of duty, a cold arrangement to secure his family's lineage, but he had never intended for it to be permanent. He saw her as a quiet, unassuming woman, easily dismissed, and certainly not a duchess worthy of his ancient name. He had given her a year to produce an heir, and when she had not, his decision was made. The annulment would be swift, discreet, and would allow him to seek a more suitable, more fertile bride. He imagined her quiet acceptance, her swift departure from Blackwood Manor, a mere footnote in his illustrious life. He had not, however, accounted for the unexpected turn of events that would unfold at his sister's garden party, an event that would shatter his carefully constructed plans and force him to confront the true worth of the woman he had so readily discarded. He could not have foreseen that the very woman he sought to cast aside would become the unexpected guardian of his family's honor, and in doing so, irrevocably alter the course of his own heart. If you're listening to this story, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which part of the world you're listening from. I want to know how far it has traveled. Lady Eleanor Ashworth, Duchess of Blackwood, traced the intricate pattern of the damask wallpaper in her private sitting room, her fingers lingering on the faded gold threads. The room, like the rest of Blackwood Manor, was a testament to centuries of wealth and power, yet to Eleanor it felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage. She had arrived here a year ago, a young woman of 20, plucked from the modest though respectable country estate of her scholarly father. Her beauty, a delicate blend of dark, intelligent eyes and a serene countenance, had caught the attention of the formidable Dowager Duchess, Alistair's grandmother, who had deemed her suitable for the Duke. Suitable not for love, but for lineage. Eleanor, though of humble origins compared to the Ashworths, possessed an education far beyond most ladies of her station, a sharp mind honed by her father's extensive library, and a quiet strength that belied her gentle demeanour. Her marriage to Alistair, the formidable Duke of Blackwood, had been a swift, formal affair, devoid of warmth or affection. He was a man of imposing stature and stern features, his dark hair and piercing blue eyes commanding attention, yet his gaze rarely softened when it fell upon her. He had made his expectations clear: a dutiful wife, a future heir, and a discreet presence. Eleanor had striven to meet these expectations, managing the vast household with quiet efficiency, overseeing the staff, and performing her social duties with grace. Yet the Duke remained a distant, enigmatic figure, a phantom in the grand halls. His presence felt more in his absence than in any shared moment. The chill of the autumn morning seeped through the tall windows, mirroring the cold dread that had settled in Eleanor's heart. She had overheard snippets of conversation between the Duke and his solicitor, hushed words about arrangements and dissolution. The truth had dawned on her with a sickening certainty. Alistair planned to annul their marriage. The lack of an heir, the unspoken reason for his coldness, was now to be the official justification. A wave of humiliation washed over her, followed by a fierce, quiet anger. She had given her best, her loyalty, her very self to this union, only to be deemed insufficient, disposable. The thought of returning to her father's home, branded as a discarded wife, was a bitter pill. Her only solace, and indeed her only true connection within the vast estate, was Lady Clara Ashworth, the Duke's younger sister. Clara, a spirited girl of 17, possessed a vivacious charm that often bordered on recklessness. She was beautiful, with a cascade of golden curls and eyes that sparkled with youthful mischief, but she lacked the guidance of a mother, having lost her at a tender age. The Duke, burdened by his ducal duties and his own reserved nature, often overlooked Clara's need for a female confidant. Eleanor, despite her own precarious position, had found herself drawn to Clara's open heart and burgeoning curiosity about the world. She saw in Clara a reflection of her own youthful idealism, tempered by a vulnerability that worried her. Just yesterday, Clara had burst into Eleanor's sitting room, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Eleanor, you must help me. Lord Percival Thorne has invited me to ride with him in the park, unchaperoned." Eleanor's heart had clenched. Lord Percival Thorne was a name whispered with a mixture of fascination and disdain in London society. A man of considerable charm and even more considerable debts, he was known for his predatory pursuit of young, impressionable heiresses. "Clara, my dear, that would be most unwise," Eleanor had gently cautioned, her voice firm despite her internal alarm. "Lord Thorne's reputation precedes him, and not in a manner befitting a lady of your standing. Your brother would be furious." Clara had pouted, her lower lip trembling. "But he is so handsome, and he says such delightful things. He promised to show me his new phaeton." Eleanor had spent a painstaking hour explaining the subtle dangers of such an invitation, the irreparable damage to a young lady's reputation, the whispers that could destroy her prospects. Clara, though initially resistant, had eventually relented, her youthful trust in Eleanor's wisdom outweighing her infatuation. Now, as Eleanor contemplated her own impending disgrace, she worried for Clara. Who would guide her once Eleanor was gone? The Duke, for all his power, seemed blind to the more insidious threats lurking in society's shadows. He saw only grand alliances and political maneuvering, not the delicate dance of reputation and propriety that governed a young woman's life. A knock at the door startled her from her reverie. It was Mrs. Davies, the stern but kindly housekeeper. "Your Grace, the Duke requests your presence in the drawing room. He wishes to discuss the arrangements for Lady Clara's garden party next week." Eleanor's stomach fluttered. The garden party, a grand affair, meant to officially launch Clara into society, a showcase of Ashworth wealth and influence. It would be her last major social engagement as Duchess, a final performance before the curtain fell on her marriage. She straightened her shoulders, a flicker of defiance in her dark eyes. She might be discarded, but she would not be defeated. Not yet. She would ensure Clara's debut was a success, and she would do so with all the dignity she could muster. The thought of facing Alistair, knowing his intentions, sent a shiver down her spine, but she met it with a quiet resolve. The golden cage might be closing, but she would not go quietly. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent countdown to an event that would either seal her fate or impossibly offer a reprieve. The sun, a deceptive orb of warmth, shone brightly on the sprawling lawns of Blackwood Manor, illuminating the vibrant hues of 1,000 blossoms. The air hummed with the polite chatter of London's elite, the rustle of silk gowns and the distant strains of a string quartet. Lady Clara, radiant in a gown of pale rose, flitted amongst the guests, her laughter echoing like chimes. Eleanor, dressed in a simple but elegant gown of dove grey, moved through the throng with a quiet grace. A serene smile fixed upon her lips, though her heart felt like a stone in her chest. The Duke, Alistair, stood by the refreshment tent, a picture of ducal authority, exchanging pleasantries with various dignitaries, his gaze sweeping over the assembled company with an air of detached observation. He had barely acknowledged Eleanor's presence since her arrival, his coldness a constant silent reminder of their impending separation. Eleanor, however, was not merely observing the social niceties. Her eyes, sharp and discerning, were constantly scanning the crowd, a protective instinct for Clara overriding her own anxieties. She had seen Lord Percival Thorne arrive, his rakish charm a dangerous lure, and had noted his immediate predatory focus on Clara. He was a wolf in gentleman's clothing, and Eleanor felt a prickle of unease. She watched as Thorne engaged Clara in conversation by the rose arbor, his head bent close, his words seemingly captivating the young lady. Clara's cheeks were flushed, her eyes sparkling with an innocent delight that made Eleanor's blood run cold. Thorn's smile, she knew, was a mask for his true intentions. He was a man who thrived on scandal, on the ruin of reputations, and Clara, with her beauty and her brother's immense fortune, was a prime target. Eleanor subtly moved closer, positioning herself within earshot, her senses on high alert. She overheard Thorn suggesting a private stroll through the more secluded parts of the garden, away from the main thoroughfare, to show Clara a rare species of orchid. Clara, flattered and naive, was clearly tempted. Eleanor's heart pounded. This was it, the setup. A secluded spot, a charming rogue, and a young, impressionable girl. The ingredients for a scandal that would forever tarnish Clara's name, and, by extension, the Ashworth family honour. Without hesitation, Eleanor sought out Alistair. She found him deep in conversation with Lord Harrington, a prominent politician. She approached him, her hand trembling slightly as she touched his arm. "Your Grace," she began, her voice low and urgent. "I must speak with you. It concerns Lady Clara." Alistair turned, his expression one of mild annoyance at the interruption. "Not now, Eleanor," he said, his tone dismissive. "I am engaged in an important discussion." "But it is urgent," she insisted, her gaze pleading. "Lord Thorn is attempting to lure Clara into a secluded part of the garden. I fear his intentions are not honourable." Alistair's brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation crossing his features. "Eleanor, you are being overly dramatic. Thorn is a guest. Clara is perfectly capable of conducting herself with propriety." He turned back to Lord Harrington, effectively dismissing her. A cold wave of despair washed over Eleanor. He wouldn't listen. He wouldn't believe her. His pride, his ingrained belief in her dramatic tendencies, blinded him to the very real danger his sister faced. She looked back towards the rose arbor. Clara and Thorn were already moving, their figures disappearing behind a thick hedge of rhododendrons, heading towards the less frequented paths that led to the folly. Eleanor knew with a chilling certainty that she could not stand by and watch. The Duke might be willing to sacrifice her, but she would not allow him to sacrifice his sister. The thought of Clara's reputation being irrevocably damaged, of her future prospects shattered, spurred Eleanor into action. She knew that intervening publicly would be a breach of etiquette, a scandalous display that would undoubtedly draw the Duke's wrath and hasten her own downfall. It would confirm all his prejudices about her, solidify his decision to annul their marriage. But the alternative, Clara's ruin, was unthinkable. Taking a deep breath, Eleanor gathered her resolve. She would risk everything. Her own reputation, her marriage, her future, all of it paled in comparison to the innocent girl she had come to care for. She began to move swiftly, her grey gown a blur against the vibrant colours of the garden, her heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She ignored the curious glances, the whispers that followed her unusual haste. Her destination was the Folly, a small, ornamental structure nestled deep within the garden, known for its secluded nature. As she rounded the final bend in the path, the scene unfolded before her like a tableau of impending disaster. Lord Thorn had Clara cornered against the stone wall of the Folly, his hand grasping her arm, his face too close to hers. Clara's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and confusion, her earlier flirtation replaced by genuine distress. Thorn was whispering something, his voice low and insistent, his intentions unmistakable. He was attempting to compromise her, to force a situation that would leave her no choice but to accept his hand in marriage or face utter disgrace. Without a moment's hesitation, Eleanor stepped forward, her voice ringing out, clear and authoritative, cutting through the hushed intimacy of the moment. "Lord Thorn, what, pray tell, is the meaning of this?" Thorn spun around, his face a mask of annoyance quickly replaced by a sneer of contempt. "Duchess, how unexpected! Lady Clara and I were merely admiring the view." His grip on Clara's arm tightened imperceptibly. Clara, seeing Eleanor, let out a small gasp of relief. "Eleanor!" Eleanor ignored Thorn, her gaze fixed on Clara. "Lady Clara, Your brother has been searching for you. He wishes to introduce you to the Earl of Pembroke's son." It was a lie, but a necessary one. Thorne's sneer deepened. "Indeed? I believe Lady Clara was quite content in my company." He attempted to pull Clara closer. Eleanor's eyes flashed with a steely resolve. "Release her, Lord Thorne, immediately." Her voice, though soft, carried an undeniable force, a quiet power that surprised even herself. She stepped between Thorne and Clara, placing herself squarely in the path of the villain, her slender form a shield for the younger woman. The act was audacious, a direct challenge to a man known for his ruthlessness, and it was done in full view of several guests who, drawn by the raised voices, had begun to gather, their faces a mixture of shock and avid curiosity. The social disaster was averted, but at what cost to Eleanor herself? The aftermath of the garden party was a maelstrom of hushed whispers and scandalized glances. Eleanor's bold intervention, while saving Clara from certain ruin, had been a flagrant breach of social decorum. To confront a gentleman publicly, to accuse him, however implicitly, of impropriety, was an act of audacious defiance that would not be easily forgiven by the rigid strictures of Regency society. Clara, pale and trembling, had clung to Eleanor's arm as they returned to the main lawn, her gratitude a silent, fervent prayer in her eyes. The Duke, Alistair, had been drawn to the scene by the growing commotion. He had witnessed Eleanor's confrontation with Thorne, the sudden hush that had fallen over the garden, and the subsequent swift departure of the disgraced lord, his face a thundercloud of thwarted malice. Alistair's initial reaction had been a mixture of shock and profound irritation. His wife, the quiet, unassuming woman he intended to discard, had caused a scene, a public spectacle that would undoubtedly be the talk of London for weeks. Yet, as he saw Clara's tear-streaked face and the protective stance Eleanor had taken, a different emotion began to stir within him, a grudging, unsettling recognition of her courage. Later that evening, in the cold formality of the Duke's study, Alistair confronted Eleanor. "What, pray tell, possessed you, Duchess?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "To create such a spectacle? To openly challenge a guest in my own garden?" Eleanor met his gaze, her own eyes tired but unwavering. "I saved your sister from ruin, Your Grace. Lord Thorne was attempting to compromise her. You would not listen to my warnings." Alistair ran a hand through his dark hair, a rare gesture of agitation. "You could have handled it with more discretion. A quiet word to a chaperone, a subtle redirection." "There was no time for subtlety," Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "He had her cornered. Another moment, and her reputation would have been irrevocably stained. Would you have preferred that, Your Grace? A ruined sister, rather than a duchess who dared to act?" The question hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Alistair stared at her, a myriad of conflicting emotions warring within him. He was furious at her public display, at the challenge to his authority, at the social fallout. Yet he could not deny the truth of her words. Clara was safe, her honor intact thanks to Eleanor. He had dismissed her, ignored her, and she had, against all odds, protected his family. The thought was a bitter draught. He dismissed her with a curt nod, unable to articulate the confusion that now churned within him. Eleanor retreated to her rooms, the weight of the day pressing down upon her. She expected the annulment papers to arrive any day now, her public defiance merely hastening the inevitable. She felt a profound weariness, a sense of emotional exhaustion. She had done her duty, and now she would face the consequences. The next morning, however, brought an unexpected visitor. The Dowager Duchess Augusta Ashworth, Alistair's great-aunt, a woman of formidable intellect and sharp wit, requested Eleanor's presence. Augusta, a widow who had long since shed the constraints of society's expectations, lived in a quiet wing of the manor, observing the world with a keen, often amused eye. She was known for her independence of thought and her unwavering honesty. Eleanor found Augusta in her sun-drenched sitting room, surrounded by books and needlework. Augusta, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, gestured for Eleanor to sit. "My dear," she began, her voice surprisingly gentle, "you caused quite a stir yesterday." Eleanor braced herself for a lecture. "I am aware, Your Grace." Augusta chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "And quite right you were to do so. That scoundrel Thorn has been a menace for too long. Alistair, bless his stubborn heart, is too caught up in his ducal duties to see the snakes in his own garden." She fixed Eleanor with an intelligent gaze. "You saved Clara, and you saved the Ashworth name from a scandal far worse than a duchess's public display of courage." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. To hear such validation, such understanding, was a balm to her wounded spirit. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Nonsense." Augusta waved a dismissive hand. "It is I who should thank you. You have a good heart, Eleanor, and a strong will. Qualities Alistair sorely needs in a wife, though he is too proud to admit it." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "He is a good man, my great-nephew, but he is blind. Blinded by duty, by expectation, by the weight of his title. He sees only what he expects to see, not what is truly before him." Augusta's words were a revelation. They offered a glimpse into Alistair's character, a hint of the man beneath the cold exterior. She spoke of his burdens, his upbringing, the pressures that had shaped him. Eleanor listened, a new understanding dawning within her. Meanwhile, Alistair found himself increasingly unsettled. The image of Eleanor standing defiant against Thorn, protecting Clara, replayed in his mind. He had always seen her as meek, compliant, a suitable if uninspiring vessel for his lineage. But yesterday she had been a force, a woman of courage and conviction. He had dismissed her warnings, and she had proven him wrong, saving his sister from a fate he, in his arrogance, had almost allowed. The whispers of society, though critical of Eleanor's methods, were unanimous in their condemnation of Thorn and their relief for Clara. Even his most trusted advisers acknowledged that Eleanor's intervention, however unconventional, had been necessary. He found himself questioning his long-held prejudices. Had he truly seen Eleanor, or merely the reflection of his own expectations? He had judged her based on her quiet demeanor, her humble origins, and her failure to produce an heir within his arbitrary time frame. But what if there was more to her? What if the woman he had so readily dismissed possessed qualities he had desperately overlooked? The annulment papers, still unsigned on his desk, suddenly felt heavier, their finality less certain. A tentative shift had begun, a crack in the icy facade of his resolve, and it was all thanks to the woman he had planned to cast aside. Emboldened by Dowager Duchess Augusta's quiet counsel and the undeniable truth of her own actions, Eleanor began to shed the mantle of the dutiful, silent wife. Augusta had encouraged her to embrace her intellect, to assert her presence, not for defiance, but for the betterment of the estate and the family. "A duchess is not merely a figurehead, my dear," Augusta had declared. "She is the heart of the household, the steward of its legacy. And you, Eleanor, have a mind capable of such stewardship." Eleanor, with Augusta's guidance, began to take a more active role in the management of Blackwood Manor. She reviewed the estate accounts, discovering inefficiencies and proposing solutions that surprised even the seasoned estate manager. She oversaw the improvements to the tenant farms, ensuring fair treatment and better living conditions, a task she approached with a quiet passion. Her days, once filled with solitary pursuits, now buzzed with purpose. Her most cherished project, however, remained Lady Clara. Freed from the immediate threat of Lord Thorn, Clara blossomed under Eleanor's attentive care. Eleanor introduced her to literature, to art, to the intricacies of managing a household, nurturing Clara's intelligence and guiding her social interactions. Clara, once prone to impulsive decisions, now sought Eleanor's advice, her admiration for her sister-in-law growing with each passing day. "You are so clever, Eleanor," Clara would often say, her eyes wide with respect. "I wish I could be more like you." The Duke Alistair observed these changes with a growing sense of bewilderment. He saw the estate running with unprecedented efficiency, the tenants speaking of the Duchess with genuine affection, and Clara, once a source of constant worry, now transformed into a poised and thoughtful young woman. He found himself seeking Eleanor's opinion on matters of the estate, initially out of curiosity, then out of genuine respect for her insights. He would often find her in the library, surrounded by ledgers and maps, her brow furrowed in concentration, a sight that stirred an unfamiliar warmth within him. He began to see her not as the quiet, unassuming woman he had married, but as a woman of substance, intelligence, and quiet power. However, the shadow of Lord Percival Thorne still lingered. Humiliated and thwarted, Thorne was not a man to accept defeat gracefully. He began to spread malicious rumors about Eleanor, whispers of her humble origins, her unladylike assertiveness, and even veiled suggestions of impropriety in her past. He sought to undermine her reputation, to discredit her in the eyes of society, and by extension, to further his own nefarious agenda. The opportunity for a public confrontation arose at a grand ball, hosted by the Countess of Danbury. Eleanor, radiant in a gown of deep emerald, was conversing with a group of ladies when Thorne approached, a smirk playing on his lips. "Duchess," he drawled, his voice dripping with false cordiality, "I hear you have become quite the manager of late. Perhaps you should consider a career in trade rather than burdening the Duke with your unconventional methods." His words were designed to sting, to remind her of her lower birth, and to question her place in their aristocratic world. A hush fell over the small gathering. Eleanor felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she met Thorne's gaze with unwavering dignity. "Lord Thorne," she replied, her voice calm and clear, "I merely strive to uphold the responsibilities entrusted to me by my husband and to ensure the prosperity of his estate. I believe it is a duchess's duty to contribute meaningfully to her household rather than merely adorn it." Thorne's smirk faltered. "Indeed. One might even say you are rather ambitious for a woman of your background." Eleanor's eyes, usually soft, now held a glint of steel. "Ambition, Lord Thorne, when directed towards honourable ends, is a virtue. Perhaps you might consider cultivating some of your own, rather than attempting to diminish the efforts of others." The retort was sharp, intelligent, and delivered with such quiet authority that it left Thorne momentarily speechless. A ripple of appreciative murmurs went through the assembled ladies. Alistair, who had been observing the exchange from across the ballroom, felt a surge of pride, an emotion so potent and unexpected that it took his breath away. He watched as Eleanor, her head held high, turned her back on the sputtering Thorne and continued her conversation, her composure unruffled. In that moment, something profound shifted within Alistair. He saw not just a dutiful wife, but a woman of immense character, intelligence, and grace. He saw the strength she possessed, the quiet dignity that had allowed her to weather his coldness, to protect his sister, and now to defend herself with such elegant ferocity. He saw the true Duchess of Blackwood, a woman far more worthy of his name than he had ever allowed himself to believe. The thought of annulling their marriage, of casting her aside, now filled him with a profound sense of regret, a chilling realization of the immense loss he would incur. He didn't want the annulment. He wanted her. He wanted the woman who had, against all his expectations, captured his admiration and, he now realized with a jolt, his heart. The realization that he no longer desired the annulment, that he, Alistair Ashworth, Duke of Blackwood, had fallen in love with his wife, hit him with the force of a physical blow. It was a truth he had stubbornly resisted, a truth that challenged every preconceived notion he held about duty, marriage, and his own heart. He had been a fool, blinded by pride and the rigid expectations of his station. He sought Eleanor out the following morning, finding her in the estate's vast library, cataloguing new acquisitions. The scent of old books and beeswax filled the air, a comforting aroma that seemed to soften the edges of his own turmoil. He stood for a moment, simply watching her, admiring the way the morning light caught the dark sheen of her hair, the focused intensity in her eyes. "Eleanor," he began, his voice rougher than he intended. She looked up, her expression one of polite inquiry, a subtle barrier still between them. "Your Grace?" He walked towards her, his hands clasped behind his back, a nervous habit he rarely displayed. I have something to say." He paused, searching for the right words that could convey the magnitude of his change of heart. "I have been a fool, Eleanor, a blind, arrogant fool." Her dark eyes widened slightly, but she remained silent, allowing him to continue. "I married you out of duty, with the intention of annulling our union if you did not produce an heir within a year. I saw you as a means to an end, a quiet presence, easily dismissed." He saw a flicker of pain in her eyes, and it twisted his gut. "I did not see you, Eleanor. Not truly. I saw only my own expectations, my own prejudices." He took a step closer, his gaze earnest. "But you have shown me the error of my ways. You saved Clara, you have brought order and prosperity to this estate, and you have faced down malicious gossip with a dignity that shames me. You are everything I never knew I needed in a duchess, in a wife." He reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly near hers. "The annulment papers, they are still on my desk, unsigned. I do not want them signed, Eleanor. I do not want to annul our marriage. I want a true marriage with you. I want to earn your trust, your respect, and, if it is possible, your affection." Eleanor listened, her heart a tumultuous mix of emotions. His confession, so raw and unexpected, stirred a deep longing within her. A longing for the love and acceptance she had secretly craved. But the hurt of his initial rejection, the cold distance he had maintained, was still a fresh wound. "Your Grace," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you speak of affection, but for a year you treated me as little more than a necessary inconvenience. How can I trust that your feelings are genuine and not merely a reaction to my usefulness?" Alistair flinched, the truth of her words a painful indictment. "You are right to question me. I have given you no reason to trust me. But I swear to you, Eleanor, my feelings are genuine. I have watched you, truly watched you these past weeks, and I have seen a woman of courage, intelligence, and profound goodness. I have seen the heart of a duchess, and I have fallen in love with it." He took her hand, his touch gentle, hesitant. "Give me a chance, Eleanor. A chance to prove my sincerity, to build a real life with you, a life based on mutual respect and I pray on love." The vulnerability in his eyes, the raw honesty of his confession was disarming. Eleanor looked at their joined hands, then back at his face. The cold, distant Duke was gone, replaced by a man humbled, earnest, and undeniably sincere. The thought of a true partnership, of a life shared with this man, filled her with a cautious hope. I do not know if I can forget the past, Your Grace," she admitted, her voice trembling, "but I am willing to try." Alistair's face lit up with a relief so profound it transformed his stern features. "Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you." His next actions spoke louder than any words. At the next major social gathering, a dinner hosted by the Duke of Rutland, Lord Percival Thorne, emboldened by his earlier attempts to discredit Eleanor, made a snide remark about her unconventional management of the Blackwood estate. Before Eleanor could respond, Alistair, his voice ringing with ducal authority, cut him off. "Lord Thorne," he stated, his eyes blazing with a protective fire, "my wife's management of my estate has proven to be exemplary, bringing both efficiency and prosperity. Any insinuation to the contrary is an insult to my Duchess, and by extension to me. I suggest you choose your words more carefully, or risk finding yourself unwelcome in any respectable drawing room in London." The public defence was unequivocal, a clear message to all who doubted Eleanor's position or her worth. Thorne, utterly humiliated, retreated, his social standing irrevocably damaged. From that day forward, Alistair made a concerted effort to bridge the chasm between them. He sought her counsel on all matters, shared his thoughts and concerns, and listened to her with genuine interest. Their conversations, once formal and stilted, became easy and intimate. He began to see the world through her eyes, to appreciate her quiet strength and her compassionate heart. Eleanor, in turn, began to let down her guard, to share her own thoughts and dreams, to allow herself to hope for a future she had once believed impossible. Their growing intimacy was a delicate dance, a slow, tender unfolding of two souls who had found each other amidst the ruins of a marriage of convenience. They were choosing a new path, a path of their own making, built on respect, understanding, and a burgeoning, undeniable love. Several months had passed since the Duke of Blackwood had declared his love, and the transformation within Blackwood Manor was profound. The cold, formal atmosphere had given way to a warmth that permeated every corner of the vast estate, a reflection of the genuine affection that now blossomed between Alistair and Eleanor. Their marriage, once a mere arrangement, had become a true partnership, a testament to the power of choice and the resilience of the human heart. Eleanor, no longer confined to the gilded cage of her private rooms, had truly come into her own as Duchess. She had overseen the complete renovation of the estate's orphanage, transforming it into a bright, nurturing environment for the children of the tenants. She had established a school for the village children, personally selecting the teachers and curriculum, ensuring that every child, regardless of their station, had access to education. Her intelligence and compassion, once underestimated, were now celebrated. The tenants revered her, the staff adored her, and even the most cynical members of society had come to acknowledge her quiet strength and undeniable grace. Lady Clara, under Eleanor's continued guidance, had flourished. She had made a most advantageous match with Lord Edward Hastings, a kind and intelligent young man who genuinely admired Clara's spirit and wit. Their engagement, announced with much fanfare, was a source of immense joy for the entire Ashworth family. Clara often confided in Eleanor, her eyes shining. "I owe it all to you, Eleanor. You taught me to see beyond superficial charm, to value true character." Alistair, once the stern, distant Duke, was now a man transformed. His laughter, once a rare sound, now echoed through the halls of Blackwood Manor. He and Eleanor worked side by side on estate matters, discussing plans for agricultural improvements, social initiatives, and the welfare of their people. He valued her counsel above all others, recognizing her keen intellect and her unwavering moral compass. Their evenings were spent in quiet companionship, reading, conversing, or simply enjoying each other's presence, a profound intimacy having replaced the earlier formality. He would often reach for her hand, his touch a silent promise of devotion, his gaze filled with an adoration that brought a blush to her cheeks. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked through the newly expanded rose gardens, Alistair turned to Eleanor, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. "To think," he mused, a gentle smile playing on his lips, "I once planned to annul our union. I was so certain of my path, so convinced of my own wisdom." He squeezed her hand. "And then you saved Clara from ruin at the garden party, and in doing so, you saved me from myself. You showed me what true worth is, Eleanor, and what true love can be." Eleanor leaned her head on his shoulder, a profound sense of peace settling over her. "Perhaps," she whispered, "it was meant to be. Sometimes the greatest blessings arrive in the most unexpected, and indeed most dramatic, of circumstances." Lord Percival Thorne, the villain of their story, had met his deserved fate. His reputation, already tarnished, had been utterly destroyed by Alistair's public condemnation and the subsequent revelations of his numerous debts and unscrupulous dealings. He had been ostracized from polite society, his name synonymous with disgrace, and had eventually fled to the continent, a cautionary tale for all who sought to prey on the innocent. The near annulment, the moment of crisis that had threatened to tear them apart, had instead forged an unbreakable bond between Alistair and Eleanor. It had forced them to confront their prejudices, to shed their masks, and to discover a love that was deeper and more enduring than any arranged marriage could have hoped to achieve. They had chosen each other, not out of duty or convenience, but out of genuine affection, respect, and a shared vision for their future. Their story was a testament to the fact that sometimes it is in the most challenging moments, when pride is laid bare and expectations are shattered, that true love finds its way to bloom, transforming a golden cage into a cherished home, and two disparate souls into an inseparable partnership. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more historical romances, and leave a comment below telling me your favorite part.